The 2020 election, it's all over the news, it's all over your social media, everybody's talking about it. But the biggest thing that people are talking about really is the presidential race, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, even third-party candidates. But that's not the only thing that's going to be on your ballot. You're going to be voting for a bunch of different ballot initiatives in California and also different political offices besides the president. Let's take time in this video and get educated about what's on your ballot. So first things first, if you want to vote, you have to be registered to vote. To vote in the United States and in the state of California, you need to be 18 years of age or older, a United States citizen, and not currently be incarcerated or on parole. Once you're on probation or any time afterwards, regardless of what your criminal history has been, you'll be able to vote in the state of California. Now, there's different exceptions to this based on where you are incarcerated and what your charges are and things of that nature. So go to www.chabotcollege.edu/vote, where you can click on information that gives you all the specific details for folks with a criminal record. If you have moved since the last time you voted, I cannot emphasize this enough, you have to re-register and use your updated address. So once again, go to chabotcollege.edu/vote, or even quicker, you can go directly to chabotcollege.edu/register to vote, and right there you will find all the information that you need to either register, to check your registration and make sure that your address is up to date, or to re-register if you do check and your address is not up to date. So take a moment now to click on this link to either register to vote, to check your registration, or to re-register. So I'd pause this video right now, go on ahead and check. Now let's get educated about what's on your ballot. Whenever I talk to students about why it is that they don't vote, one of the top things I hear is that folks aren't really sure how to understand what's on the ballot. They're not sure where to get the information. The voter guide that they're sent by the Secretary of State is difficult to understand. And so folks say, maybe I don't really know enough. I don't really feel like I should vote, or I don't really want to vote because I'm a little bit confused. But you know, it's not as hard as you think to learn about these candidates and issues. You don't have to depend upon the Secretary of State's official voter guide. There's different organizations that have done an excellent job of taking the information and breaking it down into language that all of us can understand. And you can find some of those resources by going to the Chabot Votes website. Go to chabotcollege.edu/vote and click on the link, Why Voting Matters. One of the resources that's up on the Chabot Votes website under Why Voting Matters is Voter's Edge. Voter's Edge is an excellent resource. What you'll do when you go onto Voter's Edge is you'll type in your address, and it will give you personalized information about your ballot in terms of not just who's running for president, but who's running for Congress in your area, who's running for city and local offices in your area, who's running for California State Senate, who's running for California State Assembly, who's running for mayor, who's running for city council. And it'll also give you information about California statewide ballot measures, ballot initiatives, and any local measures that your city might be voting on. And they'll break the information down, the pros, the cons, what it would do, how much money each initiative or measure would cost. And it's put into regular everyday language for regular people like us so that we can understand what's on our ballot and vote for what's in our own best interest. Another great resource that you can link to from the www.chabotcollege.edu/vote, then click on Why Voting Matters. It will link you to the Cal Matters 2020 election guide, which is excellent, you guys. I really cannot say enough positive things about this guide. They have 1-minute videos on all of the different ballot initiatives. They break down the pros and the cons. You can go into more depth. So utilize the Chabot College Chabot Votes website as a resource to link to these resources and other resources. For example, there's a couple polls up there that show you where you can talk about what you believe in, and it can kind of give you a little bit of understanding as to whether or not you're Democrat or Republican, or maybe an independent, or maybe a Green Party, or from a different political party. free, and they'll kind of give you a little bit more orientation in terms of understanding where your beliefs best fit within our political structure. For the rest of this video, we're going to go over the 12 California ballot initiatives that all of you guys will have on your ballot as long as you're a California resident. Each of these different slides will have a different image, and these images are actually easily shareable by you. You can go to the Chabot College Facebook page or go to the Chabot Political Science Instagram page at Chabot Poli Sci, and you can download a copy of these images, share them as much as you like, and send them via text, share them through your networks, and be sure that after you have taken a look at these different ballot initiatives, that you're sure that you're registered to vote. Go to chabotcollege.edu/vote and register to vote or update your registration. So there's 12 initiatives on your ballot from Prop 14 all the way through Prop 25. Let's start off by talking about Prop 14. Prop 14 is about stem cell research, and Prop 14 is asking for the voters to give the state permission to take out a $5.5 billion loan to fund the state's own stem cell research agency. This stem cell research agency funds research into diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke, epilepsy, and other diseases. So if you were to vote yes on this initiative, you would vote for the state to take out the loan to fund this agency. And if you vote no, you would say, I don't really think that our state should take out this loan to fund this agency. Supporters of Prop 14 say, hey, this agency is working on diseases that, treatments and cures for diseases that affect half of the families in California. The money that they would receive would fund research that the agency funds at the University of California. And they say, we might end up making a lot of this money back, because if we develop successful treatments for diseases or successful cures for diseases, right, we can collect royalties on any of those pharmaceutical products or treatments that we develop. Other folks, however, are opposed to Prop 14, and they say, this agency has already been open for a number of years. They haven't really had the success at developing treatments and cures that they promised that they would. They say, this agency was created when the federal government in DC banned stem cell research. Now that ban has been, has ended, and so the federal government can pay for this research. And they say that this agency needs a little bit more oversight. The California state legislature doesn't oversee them and make sure that they're doing the right thing. And actually, there have been some troubling conflicts of interest that have come up between the agency and some other profit-making medical industries. So that's Prop 14. Yes, take out the loan, fund the agency. No, don't take out the loan, don't fund the agency. The next ballot initiative is Prop 15. Prop 15 is concerned with the property taxes that businesses pay. So Prop 15 wants to raise the taxes on businesses that have over $3 million of commercial property in California. And so what they would do is they would essentially change the current system where commercial property owners currently pay tax based on whatever it is that they bought the property for. So if they bought the property for $200,000, let's say 20 years ago, maybe that same property today is worth $1.5 million, but they're still paying property tax based on what they bought it for. This would change that system and make them have to pay property tax based on whatever the commercial property is worth today. They're essentially estimating that this would raise between $6.5 and $11.5 billion a year. who would get that extra tax money? 60% of it would go to cities and counties to help pay for city and county government, and 40% would go to K through 12 and community colleges. Supporters say that, big businesses are paying property taxes that are the same as small businesses and the same as homeowners. And they're saying that, look, this would only affect a small number of businesses, those businesses that have the most wealth, that are making the most unprecedented amounts of profits. They're also saying that, hey, in the era of COVID-19, cities, counties, school districts, and community colleges, they really need the money. This is a great way to raise that money. But opponents say it doesn't really make any sense to raise property taxes right now during a recession. And they're saying that, if they raise property taxes on these commercial properties, then what the owners of those commercial properties will just do is they'll just make their tenants, let's say people, mom and pop small businesses that have that are renting out commercial space in these larger commercial buildings, they're just going to hike up those rates, and then in turn those businesses will hike up the prices for customers. So a vote yes on Prop 16 says yes, raise property taxes on commercial real estate. A no vote says let's not raise that property tax on big businesses. Next is Prop 16, which would restore affirmative action in California. Prop 16 would allow universities and government to factor somebody's race, somebody's gender, or somebody's ethnicity into making hiring, spending, and admissions decisions. But it wouldn't create racial quotas in admissions, meaning that colleges would decide what percentage of their student body they want to be white, Black, Asian, Latino, what percentage women, what percentage men, what percentage non-binary. What it would do is that universities and governments could take into consideration somebody's race, somebody's gender, or somebody's ethnicity when they either decide to hire somebody, admit somebody to a school, or to make a spending decision, like, for example, select a business to contract with. So supporters say structural racism exists in our society, and to act like we live in a colorblind society is to actually be blind to the impacts of racism. And they say, for example, if you have a school in an area that is majority Latino and the majority of the students at the school are Latinx, that the school should be able to intentionally seek out more Latinx teachers to teach in those schools. And that would be for the benefit of the school and the community overall. But opponents say schools and governments making decisions based on race and gender is actually a prejudice in itself. Everyone should be treated equally. And they also say that it's not true that America is systemically racist. That's a false claim, and actually saying that systemic racism exists in America actually fuels division. So if you vote yes on Prop 16, you're saying, please restore affirmative action. There used to be affirmative action in California, and it was outlawed in 1996. And a no vote would say, let's keep the current system, do not have affirmative action in California. Prop 17 is about people who are on parole being able to vote. It would allow people on parole in California to vote. Right now, only people on probation can vote. Of course, there are exceptions. And after people are off probation, they can vote again. This would actually allow people who are on parole to vote, but not people who are incarcerated. And it would also allow people who are on parole to run for office as long as they have no convictions for either bribery or perjury. So supporters say voting will lead to fewer parolees committing crimes. It helps remove the stigma for parolees, right? They've served their time. The stigma should be removed, and they should be allowed to vote again and be full citizens that vote. And, if you complete your prison sentence, you deserve the right to participate in democracy. But opponents say parole is an opportunity for offenders to prove that they're rehabilitated. They shouldn't get their rights back. They have to prove that they're rehabilitated so they can move on to probation. They say voting is a right that offenders should receive once they demonstrate they have been rehabilitated. therefore off parole, and they shouldn't be able to vote before then. So if you vote yes, you want to allow parolees to vote. If you vote no, you want to keep the current system. Don't let parolees vote. Prop 18 is about allowing people who are 17 years old to vote in a primary election as long as they will turn 18 by the time of the general election. So a primary election, you guys might remember in March of this year, a bunch of different, for example, Democrats were running for president in the primaries, right? There was Joe Biden. There was Pete Buttigieg, there was Bernie Sanders, there was Elizabeth Warren. Lots of different folks were running for president in the primary, and then many people went out and voted, and they voted, and then right now Joe Biden is the nominee for the Democratic Party. And the same thing is true for a bunch of different offices. So what this would do is it would allow people who were 17 in March, as long as they're going to be 18 by November, they would be able to vote in that primary election. The cost is estimated to be between $200,000 to $1 million every 2 years when there are primary elections. Supporters say, hey, we need to increase youth voting engagement. And if we're able to get teens engaged in the primary election, as long as they're 17 years old, and they will be 18 by the time of the election, they'll be more likely to vote in the general election. And they say, 17-year-olds, they pay taxes too. They should be able to engage in the primary as long as they'll be able to vote in the general. And they say, well, a lot of other states already do this. In fact, 19 states already allow 17-year-olds to vote as long as they turn 18 by November. Opponents say 17-year-olds are still kids. Their brains aren't fully developed and they're not legal adults. Teens could be unduly influenced by teachers or schools. And they say, teens, these 17-year-olds, they don't really have real-world experience paying bills or keeping a job. They shouldn't be able to vote when they are 17 years old. So a yes vote would let 17-year-olds vote if they turn 18 by election day, and a no vote would keep the current system and not let 17-year-olds vote if they turn 18 by election day. So that is Prop 18. Prop 19 is another proposition about property tax, and it's about property tax for people who are over 55 years old and for people who have been displaced by wildfires or other natural disasters in California. Right now, if you're 55 years old or older and let's say that you bought a home in 2000 and that home you bought it for $200,000, and now your home is worth $800,000, and maybe you bought a family home because you had kids at the time. Now it's, your kids are out of the house and maybe you want to downsize. If you were to move to even a small apartment, maybe that apartment is cost $400,000. So you'd be paying property tax on a much higher valued property. So a lot of times seniors and older folks will stay in their big family homes just because, even though they don't want such a big home, because they would have to pay such high property tax even if they were to downsize. And so what this proposition would do would say no, right? Those people who move and downsize, right, they would be able to keep their lower property tax rate. And furthermore, if you inherit a property, right, let's say that you have a family member that unfortunately passes away and you inherit a property from them, that you would only be able to keep the lower property tax rate that the person that you inherited it from had, because they bought it at a lower rate many years ago, as long as you live there. So for example, if you were to put that house up as an Airbnb or something of that nature, you would have to pay that higher property tax rate. So supporters say, what's the point of having all these seniors stuck in these big houses that other California families need? We have a housing shortage and a really tough housing market. Let's allow those folks to downsize, right? So that younger California families that are larger, they can move into, let's free up that housing stock. And they also say we should enclose this inheritance tax loophole to boost budgets for local government and firefighting. That's one other big piece of this, that a lot of the money would go to fight forest fires. 75% of the money raised by Prop 19 would go to fight California's wildfires and forest fires. One other important piece is that supporters say, which I didn't note here, is that it would likely decrease the amount of homes that are Airbnbs to free up more a housing stock to potential home buyers. So opponents say this prop is just a giveaway to realtors. This is something that real estate companies want because they want more housing stock. They want to be able to sell more homes and get more commissions. And they say if you inherit a property from somebody in your family or someone else, you should have the right to do with it what you want. You shouldn't have to move into it to keep the lower tax rate. This one's a little bit complicated. Hope that made sense. Prop 55 would allow people over 55 or people that are hit by natural disasters to keep their lower property taxes if they move, and a no vote would keep the current system that if you move, you have to pay the property tax based on the market value of the home when you purchased it. Prop 22 is about crime, and they're calling it the crackdown on crime proposition. What it would do is that it would increase penalties for certain property crimes and parole violations from misdemeanors to felonies. It would make it more difficult for felons to get early parole and release from prison. And a lot of this, it would revert us back to the types of penalties that existed before Prop 47 and Prop 57 ballot initiatives that were passed in the past, in the relatively recent past, that made it such that it actually lowered penalties from felonies to misdemeanors. This would revert us back and make those property crimes and parole violations felonies again. So supporters say, look, there's been increased car theft and shoplifting, and that's the result of rolling back these crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. They say allowing early prison release went too far, and many crimes that are considered nonviolent are actually harmful. We need to make them felonies again. And opponents are saying, look, 2020 is not the year to revert to this lock 'em up strategy that failed in the past. The budgets of prisons have exploded, families have been torn apart, and there's been disproportionate impacts on people of color. And they say, look, Prop 47 and Prop 57 were passed relatively recently. Voters backed them. Let's not go against what voters wanted in the recent past. So you make up your own mind. A yes vote would be to increase the penalties on property crimes and parole violations back up to felonies. A no vote would keep the current system, keep the current penalties as they are. Prop 21 is about rent control. Prop 21, if it were to pass, would give cities more freedom to be able to decide for themselves whether or not to pass rent control ordinances on housing that is more than 15 years old. Cities could prevent landlords from raising rent to market rate for new tenants using Prop 21, but this Prop 21 would say that it would not apply to landlords who own less than 3 homes. So if you're a landlord that owns 1 home or 2 homes, the cities could not pass rent control on you, but it could pass rent control on some of the larger landowners that own 3 homes, 3 units, the landlords that own 20 units or 20, that own a bunch of big apartment buildings and things of that nature. So supporters say, let's let cities prevent these big rent hikes that have been falling upon California families. They're saying, look, families are oftentimes one rent increase away from homelessness, from having to move out of their neighborhood, and this would prevent gentrification in California neighborhoods. Opponents say, look, this is not really going to help. This is actually going to make it less profitable to construct housing. So housing developers are not going to want to construct new apartment buildings, right? If they know that there's a rent control, they say, look, there's a massive housing shortage. Do we want to disincentivize builders from building more rental housing? They're saying that it would actually decrease revenue for city and state governments. And they say, like, look, recently rent control went up on the ballot. California voters voted against it. Let's not ask them to make the same, let's not second guess what they've recently voted on. So a yes vote would make it easier for cities to implement rent control. Of course, the city could decide that they don't want to. So it just allows cities more freedom, and then the city council and mayor itself would decide what they want to do for that city. They could implement more rent control. They could keep everything the same. A no vote would keep the current system, which makes it hard for cities to implement, makes it a little harder for cities to implement rent control measures. That's Prop 21. I'm sure you've heard of Prop 22. It's been all over the news. It's been all over the media. This one's about gig worker benefits, right? The benefits for workers who work for Instacart and Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and so on. So Prop 22 would exempt companies like Uber and Lyft from a new law that recently passed in California, in the California state legislature and California state government. And this law says that you've got to say, hey, Lyft, hey Uber, you've got to treat your workers like employees. They're not really contractors, they're your actual employees. So you have to provide them certain benefits like overtime pay, healthcare, sick leave, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance. Supporters of Prop 22 say, gig companies are based on a business model where we do not give our employees these benefits, right? We need to treat them like contractors for our business model to work. They say a lot of the drivers for these companies, they actually like the system as it is. They say the drivers can work more flexible schedules, and they say the customers prefer it because the rates for rides are lower or delivery is lower. They say, look, if this, if Prop 22 doesn't pass, the recent California law will, drive up prices for consumers, and they say that drivers might actually band together and join a union, and the gig worker companies don't want that. Opponents say that gig companies are actually exploiting drivers. They say that the California law is a good one, and that drivers need job stability. They need protections like sick leave and unemployment. They say that job cuts are not going to happen, and that's just rhetoric because they want to keep the government off their back and to keep the government from making them treat their employees like workers, treat their workers like employees. So a yes vote would reverse the California recent law that would eventually require gig companies to pay more benefits to workers. So a yes vote means don't give the workers these new benefits. A no vote says, let's give these workers more benefits. Let's keep this recently passed California law that would go into effect if Prop 22 does not pass. I hope that's clear. It seems like every couple of years we talk about kidney dialysis clinics on our ballot. Prop 23 is about kidney dialysis clinic rules. Prop 23 would require kidney dialysis clinics to always have a doctor present during all operating hours. It would also require that clinics report infection data, like when patients are infected, to the state, and they would also have to get approval from the state to close. And it would also prohibit rejecting patients based on the type of insurance that they have. So supporters say Kidney patients deserve better treatment and better safety than what these high-profit kidney dialysis companies offer. They say dialysis blood removal can lead to medical crises. A physician must be present at all times. And opponents say the clinics already report infection data to the feds, not to the state, but to the federal government. The opponents say we've already got the necessary medical staff present. We already have nurses present. And if we were to add doctors to the mix, that would increase cost, and that would mean that dialysis clinics would have reduced hours and closures. And they also say that this proposition is actually a ploy by unions who want to unionize dialysis workers and dialysis staff. So a yes vote would make dialysis clinics always have a doctor present as long as they are open. And a no vote would say, no, let's keep the current system. The doctors don't have to be present at dialysis clinics when they're open at all times. Prop 24 is about your data privacy. Prop 24 wants to make changes to data privacy law in California, and it would allow for you to tell businesses to limit the use and storage of your own sensitive data. It would actually add additional privacy protections for children's data, and it would create a state agency that would enforce data privacy law. Supporters of this initiative say the state government doesn't have much ability to actually enforce the data privacy laws that are on the books. We need to create new systems to enforce data privacy violations. They say because consumers need more data privacy, tech company lobbyists need less protections than consumers, and they say that this law would this initiative would shield customers from a lot of location tracking. Opponents say data privacy laws changes have already been recently passed, and they would be going into effect soon. For example, a rule that allows workers to find out info that their employers collect about them. And they say that you might actually end up having to pay more if you don't release your data to companies. So a yes vote would say change privacy law and create a enforcement agency to enforce it. And a no vote says let's keep the current system, which would implement new data privacy rules soon. You make up your own mind. Finally, Prop 25, which is about cash bail. Prop 25 would make California the first state to use a computer algorithm which takes a look at a series of different things about you, right? Failures to appear, previous charges, the current charges that you're being incarcerated, that you're being arrested for at the moment. So this algorithm would compute all those things, and that algorithm would determine whether or not someone should be released from jail while they await their trial, or whether or not they should stay in jail up until their trial. And this algorithm would replace cash bail, right? So right now, people, they make a decision, as to whether or not, you should be released, and if and then there would be a certain amount of bail that would be applied that one would have to come up with, either with their own cash or by bringing in a bail bonds organization. So the algorithm would assess a person's risk for reoffending and not appearing at trial. So moving from cash bail, abolishing that, and moving towards this algorithm system. So supporters say cash bail is classist, racist, and unfair. Poor people and people of color are less likely to have the money to bail out of jail and await their trial. They say that the bail bonds industry is, basically exploiting people who aren't able to come up with those funds. Opponents say, and there's actually two different major groups that are opposing this. Some civil rights advocates are opposing Prop 25, they say, look, cash bail is flawed, but algorithms, shouldn't be used for release decisions either. They say that the outcomes would still disproportionately impact poor people and people of color. And also the bail bonds industry itself is opposed. And I guess that's not a big surprise. Okay, so a yes vote says abolish cash bail, replace it with a system based on an algorithm that assesses risk for reoffense. And a no vote says keep the current system, allow people who are arrested to bail out if they're allowed to bail out. There's a famous saying in politics, follow the money. And when we look at these ballot initiatives, we need to follow the money here too. This slide gives you some information on who has raised how much money for the yes and the no side of all these different ballot initiatives. And this data is current as up to October 2nd. So let's take a couple of the big ones here. Yes on 15, who's supporting it? The California Teachers Association, which is a labor union. SEIU, another labor union. Chan Zuckerberg, I'm sure you guys know who that is, and other unions and foundations. And they've raised millions and millions of dollars. Who's against it? The California Business Roundtable, not surprising, and other California corporations and business associations. They've also raised millions and millions of dollars against it. Let's look at Prop 21. This is the Rent Control Initiative. Interestingly, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is really big behind it. They're putting $23 million behind yes on 21. Who's against it? The California Business Roundtable and other real estate interests. And you guys can see right here in the blue for Prop 21, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has raised $23 million, but the No on 21 group has raised more. Okay, let's take a look at Prop 22. Who's raised money for Prop 22? No surprise here. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, Postmates, right? Raising a tremendous amount of money in support of Prop 22. Who's against it? Labor unions, and they've raised a lot less money for it. So take a look at this slide. Go on ahead and pause this video and you guys can take a look at who is supporting and putting money behind these initiatives and who's opposing them and putting their money behind opposing these ballot initiatives. I've covered the basics. If you guys want to go in more depth, which I think you should do, be sure to go to chabotcollege.edu/vote and click on the link for Why Voting Matters. There's a link there to Voter's Edge, to the official voter information guide, to the Cal Voters election guide, to Ballotpedia, which has some interesting information, especially about elected officials. There's a couple of polls that help you guys to understand which side you're on in terms of your political orientation. Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Are you a Green Party? Are you American Independent Party? And so that's a great place to go. And I think an excellent place to go also is the Chabot Political Science Instagram page at Chabot Poli Sci. Check that one out too. Follow us and be sure that you're updated and informed. So now it's up to you. Be sure that you register at chabotcollege.edu/vote. Be sure that you are informed on all the different candidates and initiatives that are on your ballot and make sure that you vote. And I want to say one last thing. If you're not sure how to vote on a particular a ballot initiative, or you're not sure which candidate to support, don't worry about it. While probably the best thing to do is to vote on everything that's on your ballot, a lot of people don't. In fact, I would probably venture to guess that most people don't. You know, we don't always do everything perfectly. Probably the best thing for me to do would be to, I don't know, never drink soda again. But that's probably not ever going to happen. So even though it would be perfect and the best possible scenario to vote for everything on your ballot, you don't have to vote for everything. If you want to vote for particular candidates and particular ballot initiatives, go on ahead and do that, and you can leave things blank if you don't really feel confident about your vote. It's way better to vote on the things that you want to than to be afraid to not vote and not go in at all just because you're worried about not voting for a couple of different things or a few different things on your ballot. So go ahead, use your voice and vote, and thanks a lot.